Hello, everyone, and welcome to Week 8 NUR 410. I am your professor, Dr. Marion Johnson. Everybody's doing a great job on their weekly activities. If you're having any trouble or questions with your project, your research project, please call me, text me, email. I will continue to help you as much as I can to be successful. So in Week 8 lecture, we're going to cover qualitative studies, specifically the questions and procedure involved under the research method. Research that focuses on the effectiveness of interventions is critical evidence for nursing practice, but it is not the only evidence that is important. The definition of evidence-based practice places equal emphasis on scientific studies, clinical experience, and the preferences of patients. It is these last two, clinical experience and patient preferences, that are commonly addressed by qualitative studies. Qualitative research is grounded in the belief that reality can never be completely known because it is constructed by each individual. Attempts to measure reality are limited to the methods that aim to define variables and find manifestations of them. Much of the human experience is not easily defined. However, and outward expressions may be difficult, if not impossible, to detect. Although blood pressure and circulating blood volume are relatively easy to define and measure, experiences such as grief and quality of life are much more difficult to assess. There are fundamental reasons why qualitative research is important in nursing practice. Nursing is a humanistic, holistic approach to promoting health and minimizing the effect of disease. Indeed, the profession of nursing is based on these fundamental elements of care. Understanding the human experience of health and disease is central to appreciating how to help patients manage them. The impetus behind qualitative research is to discover the meaning of the phenomenon under study. In quantitative research, determining cause and effect is the main goal. Qualitative research integrates the use of language, concepts, and words rather than numbers to produce evidence. Qualitative research can be either descriptive or interpretive. Descriptive qualitative research is used in a primary way to establish basic knowledge about a group's or individual's response to health and illness. Interpretive qualitative research is a more complex form of analysis that involves extracting meaning from data in a way that requires inductive thought on the part of the researcher. Interpretive research emphasizes understanding the meaning that individuals ascribe to their actions and to the reactions of others. This type of research also emphasizes process and context in understanding the meaning of an experience. The point of qualitative research is to elicit a description of a social experience that is so detailed and insightful that someone who has not experienced it can understand and appreciate its nuances. The researcher accomplishes the research goals by establishing a relationship with informants and by considering the contextual issues that may shape inquiry. In many ways, qualitative research is the polar opposite of quantitative research. Designs are not pre-planned. The details of a particular study are emergent, meaning the specifics of the study apt to the emerging characteristics of the data. Qualitative research seeks to understand the meaning of an event rather than measure effects. So issues of internal validity, control, and avoidance of bias are not central concerns. Instead, trustworthiness is the guide for appraising the validity of a qualitative study. Sampling strategies, analysis procedures, and reporting of results are all considerably different for qualitative studies from quantitative ones. At the same time, qualitative and quantitative researchers have many characteristics in common. Both employ a rigorous approach to elicit the best possible answer to a research question, and both engage in disciplined inquiry aimed at finding the truth. The purpose of qualitative research. Qualitative research seeks to gather data that illuminate the meaning of an event or phenomenon. The main purpose in doing so is to develop an understanding of meaning from the point of view of the informants. Data is gathered directly from informants or through the investigator's observations. Qualitative research has been called constructivist research because it is grounded in the assumption that individuals construct reality in the form of meaning and interpretation. Such research attempts to discover the meaning and interpretations of events, phenomena, or experiences by studying cases intensively in natural settings and by subjecting the resulting data to analytic interpretation. Qualitative design answers questions about the human experience by exploring motives, attitudes, reactions, and perceptions. Qualitative designs are particularly useful in evidence-based practice for determining patient needs, preferences, and motives. Although quantitative studies are useful in determining the effectiveness of an intervention, qualitative studies are helpful in describing the acceptability of an intervention. Interventions that require lifestyle adjustments, attitude changes, or behavioral alterations are particularly well suited to qualitative study. Nursing practices that support adaptations on the part of the patient are well addressed by qualitative study, as are counseling and therapeutic communication. Qualitative study is appropriate for addressing a wide variety of research questions that focus on the needs, responses, and experience of patients. The uniqueness of qualitative study. Qualitative inquiry is unique in terms of the researcher's beliefs about the nature of reality and in the methods and procedures used to describe the informant's worldview. Although quantitative researchers focus on a single, objective reality, the lens of a qualitative researcher is based on a social construction of reality in which multiple realities are acceptable. In the world of the qualitative researcher, all variables are dependent on each other, and the contents of the study is naturalistic. Control and validity are less salient, and credibility and trustworthiness. Integration of qualitative research into evidence-based practice. In the past, evidence-based practice focused on the medical model with an overall emphasis on experimental designs that yielded an evaluation of the effectiveness of an intervention. Discovery of this evidence came through systematic reviews of quantitative studies or meta-analysis of aggregate effect size. Nursing is a profession focused on the human experience, however, and relying solely on experimental designs produces evidence that lacks dimension. As a result, Evidence of nursing practice has expanded to include qualitative studies that illuminate the nature of the patient's experience. In current practice, researchers now realize that to gain a full understanding of the needs of patients, they must integrate quantitative and qualitative research. Quantitative evidence is widely incorporated into practice, but qualitative evidence is less commonly used. Even so, both types of inquiry can prove helpful in determining best practices. The nurse must examine scientific evidence of the best nursing interventions, but he or she must also be able to see a social or human problem through the eyes of the patient. Qualitative research provides a depth of understanding and adds another dimension to quantitative evidence, one based on the human experience. Evidence of nursing practice is often discovered through methods that integrate both quantitative and qualitative studies in what is referred to as qualitative meta-synthesis and integrated review. A qualitative meta-synthesis is analogous to a systematic review. It is based on a pre-established set of selection criteria and a systematic appraisal of study quality. An integrative review encompasses both quantitative and qualitative studies, resulting in practice guideline that incorporates elements of both types of research. This integrative perspective focuses both on the effectiveness of an intervention and on the effects of the treatment on the patient's life. Both are required to assess efficiency. Attaining health involves health promoting behaviors, lifestyle adaptations, knowledge, and an attitude that supports these efforts. Qualitative research is used to discover how the nurse can support the patient's health promoting actions. Such studies are helpful in addressing complex problems such as perceptions of care or quality of life. Qualitative research helps to explain the experimental and behavioral components of illness and healthcare. The qualitative research question. The fundamental characteristics of the research question will determine whether it is best answered with a qualitative approach. Questions that reflect exploration of feelings, perceptions, attitudes, motives, and quality of life and other subjective experiences are well addressed with qualitative inquiry. In qualitative design, researchers specifically state questions, not objectives, aims, or hypotheses. There is often a central, broad question and several sub-questions. The central question is in such a way that it accommodates the emergent design that is characteristic of qualitative inquiry. Consequently, it is typically written in broad terms and is open-ended. Such questions commonly begin with words such as what and how to convey an open mind and lack of preconceived notions. The verbs in the research question are exploratory, and they do not reflect directionality. They do not indicate any expectation of demonstrating cause and effect. Thus, qualitative research questions often include verbs such as discover and explore. This broad, general approach to the topic conveys the expectation that specifics of the study will emerge. It is also likely that the question itself may evolve and change as the study progresses. The continual review and reformulation of the research question are characteristics of qualitative inquiry. The question should, however, focus on a single phenomenon or concept. A lack of specificity A lack of specificity should not be construed as lack of focus. The researcher should be clear about the fundamental purpose of the study. Qualitative studies frequently identify more specific sub-questions that address particular areas of interest. These sub-questions narrow the focus and become the explicit topics that are explored through interviews, focus groups, observations, and other sources. The way a question is worded determines the specific tradition the researcher will select to fully answer it. For example, phenomenology focuses on determining the essence of a lived experience. The following are two examples of questions that might be answered with phenomenology. What is it like to be wheelchair bound? And what is it like to be a freshman student in an inner city university? NUR researchers use ethnography to examine the interrelationship among people, environment, culture, and health. What is the culture of the Department of Nursing, and how does it affect the university as a whole? And how do the health beliefs and practices of Asian Americans integrate with Western medicine? Another question that lends itself to qualitative research is steeped in examining processes, interactions, and interrelationships through grounded theory. What are the social processes that nursing students must attend to if they are to be successful in the nursing program? An identifiable link should be apparent between the research question and the specific question used to answer it, even though the details of the design may take some time to emerge. Characteristics of qualitative research methods. Qualitative research is a systematic approach to understanding the experiences of others. This type of research is characterized by sampling procedures, data collection processes, and analytic processes that seek to achieve this understanding. Although internal validity and external validity are not paramount for qualitative researchers, concern for trustworthiness is critical. Strong qualitative research studies pay attention to the actions that can support confidence in the results. In qualitative research, subjects are referred to as informants, respondents, or participants. As in other types of research, the qualitative sampling strategy deals with how participants are selected and how many are enough. The way these two elements of strategy are addressed is unique to qualitative research. The first element of the qualitative sampling strategy is the selection procedure. Qualitative samples are most commonly selected using a purposeful sampling method. Purposeful sampling is a characteristic of qualitative research in which the researcher identifies criteria for the type of informant most likely to illuminate the research question, actively seeks out these individuals, and personally invites their participation. These criteria often involve a shared experience, membership in a specific demographic group, or simply a willingness to share information with the researcher. The researcher is usually the person who approaches the accessible informants, informs them about the study, and obtains their consent to participate. Informed consent is as important in qualitative research as in quantitative research. Concerns for confidentiality, anonymity, and protection of privacy likewise remain important. These issues may be of particular concern because of the often sensitive nature of the subject matter. The researcher is involved in each step of the sampling process. Selection bias is not a concern if the clear criteria are used and the researcher is aware of his or her own biases. Qualitative researchers acknowledge the potential for bias and assume that it is inherent in any study of an interpretive nature. This active process of identifying biases and making them explicit constitutes a control for validity called bracketing. Most qualitative samples are purposeful, but several other types of sampling strategies may be employed. Stratified purpose sampling involves sampling participants who meet certain criteria, inclusion criteria, and then stratifying them according to age, gender, ethnicity, and other criteria. For example, the researcher may be interested in how older women react to an unplanned pregnancy, so he or she might stratify the sample by age. Snowball sampling is useful when the researcher cannot locate a list of individuals who share a particular characteristic. As participants are identified, they in turn are asked to identify others who meet the inclusion criteria. In this way, the sample snowballs. Snowball sampling is a common approach when working with sensitive populations, such as drug addicts or pregnant teens. It's my cat Husky. Extreme case sampling focuses on unusual or special cases. These individuals exhibit the phenomenon of interest in its extremes. This approach may be useful for studying the characteristics of individuals who exhibit superior abilities or those who are considered worst cases. An example of the former might be a study of the characteristics of nurses who have 0 errors. The latter might be exhibited in a study of nurses who made serious errors resulting in patient death. In addition to the selection procedure, a second consideration is sample size. Qualitative studies are not intended to be generalized to populations, and they are not tests of cause and effect. Moreover, issues such as power and type 1 and type 2 errors are not applicable. Therefore, the question arises, when is the sample big enough? Saturation is the key consideration for the sample size in a qualitative study from Creswell and Clark of 2011. Saturation is reached when themes become repetitive, suggesting no new input is needed. The sample size is not predetermined, although the researcher may consider a general sample size as a goal at the beginning of data collection. Once the study has been initiated, recruitment of informants and data collection continues until the researcher finds that no new information has been elicited. This is referred to as the point of saturation, and it is the standard for determining the adequacy of the sample size. Saturation may be achieved with as few as 5 or 6 informants, or it may take a considerably larger number of participants in studies of complex or sensitive topics. Determination of saturation is up to the researcher, but it should be reported that it was reached. Data collection methods and procedures. Data may be collected through a variety of methods. Qualitative data are usually collected through a combination of methods, including observation, interaction, and document review. Interaction data may be collected via essay questions, interviews, focus groups, and conversation. These data are often recorded on audio tape and transcribed for analysis purposes. Some researchers employ photographic methods to capture observations, document interactions, and even stimulate discussion. Video may be used with individuals or focus groups to capture both verbal and nonverbal responses to questions. With most qualitative research traditions, analysis occurs simultaneously with data collection. Other significant departure from qualitative research. This method of analysis, called constant comparison, is widely used in qualitative traditions. Data are reviewed and analyzed as they are gathered, and new data are compared to what has been interpreted to support or disapprove earlier conclusions. This process results in an emergent analytic process that involves and changes focus as more data are gathered. The analytic process involves coding units of meaning into themes. Observations of body language, the surroundings, and other factors are also an important part of the data collection. Often referred to as field notes, they enrich the data interpretation process with detailed descriptions of the context, environment, and nonverbal communications. These observations are generally inserted into the transcripts as soon as possible to ensure that they are recollected correctly and completely. In addition, the researcher may maintain a personal journal to capture his or her individual responses and reactions to the research process. The researcher must be attentive to how the data are collected. For example, when the study addresses sensitive issues, the researcher needs to create an environment of safety and trust for the participants. Conducting interviews in natural settings, for example, observing and speaking with nurses in the unit conference room or meeting with an informant in the informant's home, is appropriate for qualitative studies and can elicit the most natural responses. It is important to anticipate the concerns participants may have regarding the phenomenon under discussion. The researcher must strive to engender mutual respect and maintain confidentiality throughout the data collection process. Enhancing the trustworthiness of qualitative study. Qualitative study is not subject to concerns about internal or external validity because these studies do not focus on cause and effect, and they are not intended to be generalized to larger populations. Nevertheless, rigor and truth remain key concerns. No researcher wants his or her findings to be misleading or in error. The rigor of qualitative research, however, is judged differently from quantitative research. The work of Guba and Lincoln advances the notion that qualitative research is based on trustworthiness rather than reliability and validity. Trustworthiness includes the following specific characteristics. Credibility. The results of the study represents the realities of the participants as much as possible. Conformability. The researcher attempts to enhance objectivity by reducing bias in methods and procedures. Dependability. Repetition of the study with similar subjects in similar circumstances results in consistent findings. Transferability. Results can be transferred to situations with similar subjects and settings. Methods to support these characteristics should be built into study methods and procedures. One of the most common threats to credibility of a study is bias, drawing premature conclusions, basing themes on isolated responses, and incorrect interpretations can all influence the strength of a qualitative study. The NUR researcher can limit the effects of bias through bracketing, prolonged engagement, triangulation, member checking, and audit trails. Some of these processes are built into the design of qualitative study. Others are initiated during analysis of results. Separating the specific strategies that are used in each phase of qualitative study can prove difficult. However, because emergent design and data analysis often overlap, these controls are discussed in this chapter as they relate to design. Bracketing, one method of limiting the effects of researcher bias, is a means of demonstrating an awareness on the potential assumptions and preconceived notions of the researcher. Qualitative researchers must be sensitive to the ways in which the researcher and the research process have been shaped. That's from Munhall of 2010. This sensitivity, which is referred to as reflexivity, is based on introspection and acknowledgement of biases, values, and interests. Reflective introspection is a key component of bracketing and requires maturity and honesty on the part of the researcher. Prolonged engagement with the participants involved in the study supports the credibility of the researcher's conclusions. Extended contact with informants and the setting serves as a means of controlling the biases that might otherwise result in premature conclusions. Included in this process is the investment of sufficient time in the data collection process so that the researcher gains an in-depth understanding of the culture, language, or views of other group under study. Sustained involvement also helps building the trusting relationships and rapport that are necessary to elicit accurate and thorough responses. Triangulation is a useful strategy for the enhancement of credibility. In triangulation, at least 3 sources of information are used to support each major conclusion. The qualitative researcher uses a variety of methods or informants to capture a more complete and insightful portrait of the phenomena that are being studied. 4 types of triangulation have been described by Denson and Lincoln. Data source triangulation involves the use of multiple data sources in a study. For example, interviewing diverse key informants to give credence to the findings. Investigator triangulation employs more than one person to collect, analyze, or interpret a set of data. Theory triangulation involves gaining and using multiple perspectives from other researchers or published literature. Method triangulation entails the use of multiple data collection methods, for example, interviews, observations, and document review. Performing external checks on the data and their interpretation is a common method of ensuring validity via member checking. Researchers use member checking when they ask participants to review and comment on the accuracy of transcripts, interpretations, or conclusions. Member checking requires that contact be made with each informant twice, once to collect data and a second time to review their accuracy and completeness. An audit trail supports the dependability of a study and its analysis. An audit trail is a thorough, conscientious reflection on and documentation of the decisions that were made, the procedures that were designed, and the question that were addressed during analysis. A thorough record of the emergent design decisions help other researchers confirm the findings. Qualitative research has a subjective focus, but it does not lack rigor. Methods of ensuring trustworthiness enable the researcher to support the validity and usefulness of his or her conclusions. These strategies should be evident throughout the research process and documented in the research report. Classifications of qualitative traditions. Multiple strategies are available to the qualitative researcher. The selection of a particular tradition depends on the purpose of the research and the nature of the research question. Some traditions are more common in nursing and health care in general. These designs, which include those in the following list, are regularly used because they answer questions about human reactions and interactions. Case research methods. Intense study of a single subject or small group of subjects. Content analysis, interpretation of the meaning in verbal responses or in documents. Phenomenology, investigation of the meaning of a phenomenon among a group who have experienced it. Ethnography, study of the features and interactions of a given culture. Grounded theory, research aimed at developing a theory of process, action, and interaction. Although these are the most common encountered qualitative methodologies, often no specific tradition is identified. Rather, a researcher may refer to a study as qualitative research without identifying the specific approach employed. Shin, Kim, and Chung reviewed more than 500 articles in 2 qualitative nursing research journals to determine the most common methods identified. In nearly 30% of the articles, no specific method was identified. Thus, qualitative design principles may be applied with no specific methodology. Even so, specific methodologies should be matched appropriately to research questions when possible, and guidelines have been developed to address these situations. Case research methods. Case research methods. Research often seeks to understand entire populations, but nursing practice is concerned with the health of individuals. Case research methods involve the in-depth study of a single participant or a single group over an extended period of time so the impact of health and illness on an individual can be described. Multiple data collection methods may be used, including observation, interviewing, and instrumentation. Mixed methods, which combine qualitative and quantitative data collection, are also common. Case research is an important method for studying the responses of individuals and small groups relative to the interventions, health behaviors, and perceptions of illness. It may be the only way to study individuals with rare conditions. Case research methods are often the basis for teaching strategies, grand rounds, has its roots in the medical model, but it is evolved into a valuable teaching tool in all health professions. Using in-depth analysis of individuals and groups helps eliminate the human dimension of the healthcare experience and enables a rich, multidimensional picture of the subjects to emerge. Questions that are addressed with case research. Research questions that focus on the effects of treatments or conditions for individuals are appropriately answered with case study. The case research method is valuable because it can generate evidence about the impact of health and illness for an individual who represents a unique or interesting subject. Often these cases are ones that present challenges for nursing care. Exploratory questions and questions that are intended to produce potential interventions for later testing are also well addressed with case research methods. Because case research allows for a thorough analysis of a rare or uncommon situation, it often leads to the discovery of relationships that were not obvious or observed prior to the experiment. Methods and procedures for case research. Case research is an intensive investigation designed to analyze and understand factors that are important to the cause of health problems, care of patients, and outcomes of interventions. Strengths of case research. Case research methods have some clear strengths in generating evidence for nursing practice. Case research is practical method for studying individuals or small groups, has direct applicability to patient care, and demonstrates the impact of health and illness on individuals. Limitations of case research. Case research methods have some inherent limitations. In-depth analysis requires extended contact and involvement in the research. Attrition of the subjects limits the usefulness of the entire study. Studies apply only to individuals and are not applicable to other groups of people. These studies have an inherent lack of control over extraneous variables, so conclusions about the effects of treatments cannot be drawn. Content analysis. Content analysis is technically not a specific qualitative research design. It is more accurately described as data analysis method. Nevertheless, this term is commonly used to describe designs that rely on data collected via interviews or document analysis that use interpretive coding to arrive at themes and patterns. Such designs are sometimes referred to as descriptive qualitative designs. But even the term is misleading because these studies may be interpretive as well. In reality, content analysis is often used when no other classification fits. Questions that are addressed with content analysis. The primary usefulness of content analysis is to answer a research question that explores feelings, perceptions, thoughts, attitudes, or motives related to a concept or of interest to the researcher. Content analysis can be used for either descriptive or interpretive studies. Methods and procedures for content analysis. Content analysis requires a researcher to gather in-depth data in word form. Purposeful sampling is used to identify and recruit appropriate informants who can best help the researcher answer the specific research question. General interview questions are designed and document retrieval guidelines are developed. Although interviews and focus groups are widely used to gather data for content analysis, document review may be the focus of the study. Many researchers use all three strategies as a method of triangulating the data. Interviews and focus groups are commonly employed for phenomenological study or research focused on subjects aspects of a concept. Document review is more common in studies that involve historical reviews, biographies, or secondary data analysis. Strengths of content analysis. Content analysis is widely applied to answer qualitative research questions. It has some definite advantages as an approach to qualitative inquiry. Limitations of content analysis. Content analysis is not appropriate for all studies because it has the following limitations. Content analysis relies on the informant's recall, ability to report, and willingness to talk. Selection effects may come into play because those who agree to participate in interviews may not be representative of all those who are effective. The researcher's bias may affect the interpretation and coding of themes in the data. Content analysis is a popular technique in nursing and healthcare research, and it is considered one of the less complex qualitative methods. It is useful in identifying themes, patterns, and common experiences among individuals related to their healthcare and disease. Phenomenology. Phenomenology is concerned with the lived experiences of humans in relation to a shared phenomenon. Researchers use this tradition to describe how unique individuals respond to the circumstances of their health and illness. Phenomenology may be either descriptive or interpretive. It is based on the philosophical premise that it is possible to capture and articulate the essence of an experience that can be explored and understood. Phenomenology is defined as a research methodology that is rigorous, critical, and systematic in its investigation of a human experience in context. That's from Fain of 2013. It is useful for understanding the way in which patients react and respond to both everyday experiences and unique events. It is also useful for obtaining evidence of nursing practices that support and enhance the ways patients respond to the challenges in their healthcare. Questions that are addressed with phenomenology. Phenomenological research always focuses on a variation of the following question: what is this experience like? The goal of this research is to develop rich, detailed, insightful descriptions of the way individuals react to the experiences in their lives. It is particularly helpful when an experience of interest has been poorly defined or explored. Phenomenology can also identify interventions that might support or enhance the experiences of patients who are facing healthcare decisions or conditions. Methods and procedures of phenomenology. Phenomenological study begins with the articulation of an experience of interest. This becomes the focus of the research question. Sample selection and data collection. In this sense, phenomenological research questions are specific to a single experience. Although the exact nature of the study and data collection may evolve and change, the focus of on the experience of the interest does not. One question that has been articulated: the researcher must identify informants who have experienced the phenomenon. Subjects are purposefully selected based on this central characteristic, but other criteria may also be specific, such as demographic, social, or relationship roles. Samples are often small, although data collection should continue until saturation is achieved. From Connolly of 2010. In phenomenology, the researcher acts as the primary data collection instrument. It is important, then, for the researcher to conduct a reflective self-assessment for the purposes of bracketing prior to the initiation of data collection. Phenomenological study. Sorry, got some allergies going on. Phenomenological studies require that an individual be able to reflect on and report reactions to a specific phenomenon in his or her life. Data collection generally takes place through interviews or focus groups. This is less concerned about the facts of an experience than about the meaning of the facts to the people experiencing them. A general interview guide may be developed for data collection, but the interviewing process is guided by the respondent as the interviewer follows the thoughts and ideas of those who have experienced the phenomena. Data are transcribed and analyzed using coding and content analysis. Phenomenology generates large amounts of data, so the research procedure should include a method for filing, coding, and retrieving data. Analysis is through constant comparison, and so continuous reflection on the meaning in the data, use of analytic memos, and comparison of emerging data with existing data are essential in determining the essence of the experience for informants. Strengths of phenomenology. Phenomenology has several advantages as an approach to generating evidence for nursing practice. The phenomenological tradition can be used to study a wide range of phenomena, including both common and uncommon experiences. The interviewing process that is characteristic of phenomenology enables exploration of a wide range of responses. Phenomenology lends itself well to focus groups and, as such, may yield results that are more transferable than other types of qualitative study. The procedures of phenomenological research are relatively straightforward, and questions are usually more focused than for other types of qualitative study. From Flood 2010. Limitations of phenomenology. Phenomenology is a valuable source of evidence for nursing practice, but it also has some limitations. Phenomenology generates large amounts of data that must be carefully managed. Because the reports of experiences may be sensitive, protection of confidentiality is paramount. Ethnography. Ethnography focuses on the culture of a group of people. The assumption underlying the tradition is that every group of individuals evolves a culture that guides the way members structures their experiences and view the world. Questions that are addressed with ethnography. Ethnographic research questions are unique in that they focus exclusively on understanding the culture of a group of individuals. Many ethnographic questions focus on large-scale studies. For example, what is the culture of Samoan village? Nursing research usually focuses on smaller, more narrow-focused cultural studies. What is the culture of a critical care waiting room? Methods and procedures of ethnographic study. Ethnographers engage in extensive field work to learn about the culture under study. Ethnography is a time-consuming and labor-intensive type of research. Strengths of ethnography. Ethnographic studies provide rich information about a culture and insights into its reactions and interactions. The following are some of the strengths of the design. These studies provide insights about the way unique groups react to health and illness and give the nurse information with which to design effective interventions that will support health. Ethnography is a naturalistic inquiry that enables the nurse to draw conclusions about how health and illness are addressed in real life. Many different kinds of cultures can be defined for the purposes of ethnography. This approach lends itself to groups as small as children in the 3rd grade health class, as well as to groups on a grander scale, such as members of an ethnic subgroup. Limitations of ethnography. Ethnography can help nurses understand how cultural groups respond to health and illnesses, but these studies have some limitations as well. These studies are labor-intensive and time-consuming. Achieving the rapport and intimacy necessary for honest sharing of the lived experience may require years of involvement on the part of the researcher. Some researchers spend their entire professional lives studying a particular culture. Grounded theory. Grounded theory is the discovery of theory from data systematically obtained through qualitative means. It does not begin with theory, but rather leads to development of a theory to explain phenomena. The intent of grounded theory is to discover a pattern of reactions, interactions, and relationships among people and their concerns. That's from Moore of 2010. This complex type of qualitative research requires a high level of skill and the capacity to suspend bias related to the topic of interest. Grounded theory. Research aimed at discovering and developing a theory based on systematically collected data about a phenomenon. The intent is to discover a pattern of reactions, interactions, and relationships among people and their concerns. Questions that are addressed with grounded theory. Grounded theory rarely has a central research question. Instead, the research problem is discovered, as is the process that resolves the problem. Because the purpose of the research, if such research is to develop theory, The grounded theory study begins with a general area of interest and proceeds to explore how individuals frame the problem, which variations arise as a result, and how people deal with it. Grounded theory provides evidence about the ways people react and interact with one another and with their own health and illness. That's from Hernandez of 2010. The basic elements of grounded theory include answering the following questions. What is the chief concern of people regarding this area of interest? And what accounts for the way people deal with this concern or problem? Methods and procedures for grounded theory. Grounded theory studies are the least pre-planned of any of the qualitative methods. The researcher begins with a general research question, selects individuals who are most likely to illuminate the initial understanding of the question, and collects data using a variety of methods. Interviewing, observation, and document review may all be used in establishing grounded theory. Strengths of grounded theory. Grounded theory is the method for developing the very basis of nursing practice via the proposition of theories for subsequent testing. The following list highlights some of its strengths. Grounded theory provides the basis for testing theories about reactions and interactions. Enables the exploration of human actions and interactions related to subjects for which very little knowledge is available. It allows researchers to determine what is rather than suggesting what should be. These studies help build modules that can be used to assess human reactions to nursing interventions. Limitations of grounded theory. Grounded theory is essential for the development of nursing theory, but it has significant limitations, particularly for a novice researcher. Grounded theory is difficult to conduct well and requires a high level of competence on the part of the researcher. Reading qualitative research studies. Qualitative research as evidence for nursing practice is appraised for its trustworthiness, just as quantitative research is evaluated for reliability, validity, and generalizability. However, considerable controversy exists regarding the standards used to evaluate qualitative research. Some researchers argue that the same standards that are applied to quantitative research should be used to appraise qualitative studies. Unfortunately, the nurse reader is likely to become frustrated and the number of qualitative studies included in a review seriously limited if this approach is used. Questions whether any predetermined criteria are appropriate to judge these primarily emergent designs. This conclusion is based on the belief that because no unified qualitative research paradigm exists, there is little impetus to define predetermined criteria with which to evaluate it. When quantitative research is sought as support for evidence-based practice, the evaluation typically relies on criteria that are specific to qualitative inquiry rather than quantitative study. To determine if the results of a qualitative study apply in a specific patient care situation, the standards for design, implementation, and analysis of qualitative inquiry must be used as a bias for appraisal. Using qualitative research study as evidence. The integration of qualitative research findings into nursing practice is a strategy receiving increasing attention. Qualitative research can help the nurse better understand the nature of effectiveness of interventions. In other words, what about the intervention What about the intervention was helpful to the patient? What was clear? What was unclear? How did the patient respond to the treatment? Conversely, qualitative research can be invaluable in determining why an intervention did not work. What about the treatment was unacceptable to the patient? What affect his or her life in a diverse way? What caused complexity or confusion or was not sustainable? A treatment may be shown to be effective in a controlled setting, such as a randomized controlled trial, but not sustainable in a natural setting. Interventions may produce side effects that are not tolerated or that are undesirable. Quality of life may be affected in a way that is not acceptable to the patient or that is difficult to manage on an everyday basis. Qualitative research is helpful in discovering the ways that nursing interventions affect the everyday life experience of an individual in both positive and negative ways. As such, these studies provide the evidence that is needed to help patients sustain their treatments and get the most benefit from them. Qualitative research adds a dimension to the interventional study that cannot be attained through measurement of variables alone. Much of the human experience, particularly in regard to health and illness, is affected by motivation and perception as much as by therapies. These aspects are some of the qualities most suited to qualitative inquiry. Audrey and Young, Gomersall and Brown in 2012 identified some of the ways in which qualitative research can be linked to interventional analysis. They note that qualitative study can help nurse researchers do the following: identify the needs of a target population, design interventions that are most likely to be acceptable to patients, address the process and implementation issues associated with an intervention, improve the understanding of the impact of an intervention in a natural setting, understand the reasons of attrition, cessation of treatment, or lack of adherence to a treatment protocol. These are all ways that the nurse can integrate qualitative research into the evaluation of interventions and the design of evidence-based practices. It is particularly important to recognize the humanistic, holistic nature of nursing practice, and qualitative research is invaluable in adding this facet to the evidence that it is basis for nursing knowledge. How does one determine whether to use qualitative research study as sound evidence for practice? Henderson, Rolt and Kirkpatrick, Wilson and Wimpenny, and Stretch recommend 4 rules for determining whether to include qualitative research studies in evidence-based practice. The study must satisfy the general assumptions for the development of a practice guideline. The study supports the topic under study and meets the inclusion criteria, and it is retrieved from a peer-reviewed journal. The study must meet the qualitative screening criteria. The study involves observation of social or human problems in a natural setting, and observations are interpreted by the researcher. The study is concluded in conformance with ethical principles for research. The study exhibits the criteria for trustworthy qualitative evidence. The study is designed and carried out in a way that supports its credibility, transferability, dependability, and conformability. The strength of recommendations is based on the quality of the evidence. Qualitative studies are graded according to their strength, and subsequent recommendations are consistent with the level of evidence. Qualitative studies are valuable additions to the evidence that supports nursing practice. These studies are subjected to the same appraisal processes as quantitative studies, albeit one that is based on characteristics that are specific to qualitative research. Creating qualitative evidence. The creation of qualitative research requires patience, persistence, and a passion for the subject under study. Although qualitative studies are emergent designs, they are no less rigorous because of this factor. The lack of preconceived design elements does not mean the study is unfocused. It does not mean that extended contact is required. So the nurse researcher must devote substantial time and effort to carrying out the study effectively. Analysis can be a complex process, and software that supports statistical analysis has no utility in qualitative coding. Software is available for qualitative analysis, but it does not analyze the data for the researcher. These processes still require substantial time and skill. With that said, qualitative research enables the nurse researcher to identify rich, interesting, and insightful information about the experiences of patients. Health and illness are humanistic considerations, and qualitative inquiry is well suited to help the nurse understand them. The approach to a qualitative study is not preconceived, but it is a systematic. The following steps can help the nurse researcher create a qualitative study that meets standards for trustworthiness and makes a strong addition to the evidence for nursing practice. Identify a broad research question. The central question is broad and general, but it should focus on a single phenomenon or concept. Sub-questions can add detail to the central question, but may evolve and change as the study emerges. Sub-questions often provide guidance for the development for specific interview guides, procedures, or sampling considerations. Select a broad research question. Determine criteria for selection of participants who can best inform the question. Locate a source of informants and invite their participation through informed consent. Design general data collection procedures. Transcribe data into their entirety and add field notes. Analyze data as they are collected. Develop a code book of themes and code units of meaning. Check the conclusions of participants and report the themes with supporting exemplars from informants. Reporting themes and using the words of informants to support these conclusions is the accepted way to report qualitative studies. The use of quotations enables the reader to judge the credibility of the interpretations of the researcher. That concludes Week 8, NUR 410, Nursing Research. Please call, text, email. I will help in any way. Let's be successful, and I will see you guys in Week 9. We are on the countdown for conclusion of week of NUR 410. See you guys soon. Thank you.